day I was asked the question if I believe in Christ. So I said yes. So then the person asked me to explain something. If I believe in Christ, how is Christ the Son of God, but also He's God? They said, that's kind of saying two things at the same time. How could He be the Son, but yet still He's also God? I mean, come on. I said, okay. Do you believe in the Bible? He says, yes. I said, all right, fine. Because the reason why I asked that, it makes no sense you telling somebody something from the Bible if they don't believe in the Bible. But he believed in the Bible. So I said, all right, no problem. So we said, let's move to Genesis. So we move to Genesis, and in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. There's nothing ambiguous about that. It's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. But when we move to verse 2, it says, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. Now, right there you realize there are two forces at work in the creation of our planet. There are two beings there. If there were one, they would just say, God created the heaven and earth, and God moved upon the face of the water. It says, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. So right then, there are two beings. If we go on to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, it said, let us make man in our image. Who is God speaking to? It's only logical, since we just identified that He was creating the planet also with its not a being, the Spirit of Himself. Then it's only logical to think that that's who He's speaking to. What if He was speaking to someone else also? No, it cannot be angels, because if we know that angels cannot create life, if angels could have created life, then the devil, being an angel, would just resurrect all the people that is with him. So who else was he speaking to? So to get the answer to that, we go to John chapter 1, verse 1, and we're going to read from verse 1 to verse 3. Right? So it says in John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Then verse 2, it says, the same was in the beginning with God. And then in verse 3, it says, basically that everything that was made by Him, and without Him was nothing made. Basically, that's what it says. Now, if you move on, we know that John is writing about Christ. We know that. He's given a record or an account of Christ's life on the earth. So we know he's talking about Christ. So just for argument's sake, bear with me for a minute. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John chapter 1, verse 1. Let's remove the Word. Everywhere we see the Word for this discussion, we're going to put Christ. So we're not going to say in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We're going to move that, and we're going to say Christ. So we're going to read it like this. In the beginning was Christ, and Christ was with God, and Christ was God. Okay? Because we obviously know that John is speaking about Christ. So in the beginning was Christ. Christ was with God, and Christ was God. So then the guy says, you see, you confused me again, because you just said Christ was with God, and at the same time Christ was God. How is that possible? Well, the answer to that is in verse 3 of the same chapter, John chapter 1, verse 3. In verse 3 it says, everything that was made by Him, and without Him, basically nothing was made. So if John is speaking about Christ, and he's saying, man, without Christ, there was nothing that was made. Everything that was made by Christ. If he is saying that, if you go back to Genesis, then God would have to be speaking also to Christ. Because we just said, without Christ, there was nothing was made without Christ. So if nothing was made without Christ, that would include our planet in the beginning of our creation. So when God says, come, let us make man in our image, He was also speaking to Christ. So if Christ was there with the Father, co-creating the planets, the universe and everything, all the angels and everything, especially when it comes to our planet, if He is co-creating with the Father, and He had a part in creating this planet, then it is logical that Christ is also our God, because He's also our Creator. So although He's the Son of the Most High God, the King of the universe, He's also God to us and every species in the universe. That's the simplest way that I could explain how come Christ is also God and also the Son of God. He's the Son of God, but he's also God to us because he created us. He was with the Father creating us when everything was being made. All right. So guys, let me know what you think about this. Like or dislike, but make sure you leave a comment whether you agree or you disagree, and then state why you disagree. And if there's any other subject that you guys want to ask about, feel free to ask. All right.